Hello, everybody. I hope everything's starting to fit into place. I want to thank you for the work that you did getting all of those little things done that I asked for. I asked you to answer this question with one word, and you created this word cloud. And this is your first writing assignment, actually, because this piece of multimodal visual writing is actually a collaborative effort also. So this kind of captures in one word who we are, what you think about when you think about professional writing. So it's always a good activity, a good icebreaker, because writing is something that we often neglect to acknowledge. Writing is the creation of relationship. Communication is the creation of relationship. When you make meaning with another person, you begin a relationship. And all too often, people don't stop to think about that when they write. They think that their purpose to write is just to get information on a piece of paper, on a screen, and pass it forward, and that's it. It's out of their hands, it's over, the task was done. But actually, what you're doing is you're creating meaning for another person to accept and to take and to do something with, whether they learn from it, act from it, continue to write it, whether they respond to it, it's relationship. So from this day forward, if you don't think about writing as relationship, I'd like you to start doing that now. Think about all the things you write in the course of a day, all of the messages, all of the posts, all of the texts, and think about how all of those are intended to send a message to someone, to make a difference in some way. The other thing I'd like to focus on is that writing is multimodal, and especially where we're writing mostly digitally now. I just heard this the other day that over 80% of writing is now visual. That means that the modes of animation and video and pictures, images, etc., have become the most important mode of writing for modern audiences, but not for every audience and not for every purpose. So in every case, we have to think about what writing is. We always think of writing in an academic sense, and we tend to go to the linguistic, words on paper or words on page. But that's only one part of writing. And if you think about the writing that you learned to read from, it was multimodal. Books popped up and they sang to you and they spoke to you and they showed you pictures and they animated, they moved. That type of writing is authentic writing, and that's the writing you started with. So that type of writing is still real important, and we have to think when and where do we use those other modes? And when do all of these modes come into play? And how can they be effective? The lessons focus on rhetoric, what it is and what it can do for you. So I want to take a look at that word and get an understanding of what that means, at least in the context of this class. Rhetoric is the purposeful use of language and images. It really is not that complex of a word to understand. It's basically purposeful communication. In other words, making meaning. In other words, creating relationship. And it's influenced both by you and by the person for whom you're making your information, whom you're sharing your message with. And it's real important, again, to think about both of those things when we write. Aristotle asked the question, why is rhetoric related to the birth of democracy? And he answers it by saying, rhetoric is defined as the ability to see what is possibly persuasive in every given case. Also, when we think of rhetoric, we think of these three classic words that I'm sure you've heard before: ethos, pathos, and logos. I also had kairos, opportunity. And let's take a look at what those words mean. Very simply, we look at credibility, ethics of writing, emotions and feelings, at logic and reason. What's the opportunity to create this meaning, create this relationship, to make this difference, to get someone to think or know something they didn't know before, to act differently than they acted before, to understand something in a different way than they did before. Now, about a year and a half ago, we were surprised when this kind of appeared on the scene, and it kind of sits just between ethos and kairos in that it has given us new opportunities, but it has really, really challenged credibility and ethics. And we are kind of in a crisis of adapting this new genre and what it's going to do for us, what it's going to do to us, and what we're going to do with it in ways that are ethical and credible and useful. And what we know is that we don't want it to become this. It can't replace us. It can't replace writing. It can't replace our ideas and our meaning. It can't be forefront over everything else. And on the other hand, it can't be absent anymore. It's going to be very much a part of your workplace. In my workplace at URI, that's all we've been talking about. Workshops, summits, conferences, everything's been about artificial intelligence in the classroom, in learning, and especially in writing. So that's going to continue as we develop our ideas, and we need to be prepared for that. So I mentioned relationship, and I've mentioned rhetoric. Now, focus of these things when you're being rhetorical is your audience, your reader, your viewer, your listener, your receiver of your message. Who is your audience? Nothing is ever more important than that when you're being rhetorical. You have to think about the demographics of your audience, their age, their location, their gender, their nationality, their abilities and disabilities, their sexuality, their education level, their income level. All of these things will come into play in different circumstances in and out of the workplace. You have to think of the psychographics of your audience, their values, their beliefs, their positions, their interests, their concerns. What is your relationship to these people? And specifically in your case, what is your work relationship to these people? And then think about what's your purpose. How can you be purposeful with these people? And what language and images are you going to use for your message to get these people to think or feel or do something different after reading or seeing your text? There are choices you have to make when you're being rhetorical. You have to think of what genres you're going to use, what modes you're going to use. Authors make choices all the time about balancing these elements to achieve their purpose for their audience. Authors choose what to include, your words, your sounds, your images. But the point is, the person who is most effective is the person who knows how to choose these effectively. Every communication is rhetorical. It's an opportunity for change, an opening to bring some light to a problem, to solve a problem, whether it's subtle or whether it's big. What is a target audience? Well, in the workplace, it kind of boils down to 3 or 4 basic audiences. They're the people who are capable of being influenced by your communication, people that you're going to bring about the change with, your clients and customers, your coworkers, and of course, your supervisors. These are the people you're going to be communicating most with in the workplace, and you'll communicate with each of them differently. If you go back and watch, if you haven't watched yet, watch the video by Steven Pinker, where he talks about the 3 different types of relationships and communication. It's very powerful. It kind of breaks it down into something very simple to understand. And those 3 types of relationships are exactly the types of relationships you're going to confront in the workplace almost daily. So as you work through this course, as you learn how to write memoranda, reports, letters of understanding, learn how to write for presentations, I challenge you to think about always who this writing would be for, what it should look like, how multimodal it should be. What are your goals when you write for the audience for whom you're writing?